You're listening to the Autism Weekly podcast. Each week we share community voices and bring light to stories that increase awareness, acceptance, equity, access, and inclusion. If you haven't already, subscribe to join the Autism Weekly family. I'm your host, Jeff Skibitsky. This week, we're joined by Kadin McElwain, an advocate from Ohio who has dedicated his life to proving doubters wrong and helping others on the autism spectrum thrive. Despite being told he wouldn't be able to live a normal life, he has continuously broken barriers, from excelling in academics and athletics to leading impactful autism awareness initiatives in his community. Today, we'll be discussing Kadin's personal journey, the challenges he's overcome, and the incredible work he's doing to support autistic individuals. Welcome to the podcast, Kadin McElwain.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And, Kadin, one thing I'd love to be able to give you the platform to share is we talked about, some of the things that you've done academically and athletically. Do you mind sharing, some of those successes that you've had before we go into how that journey came about?
Yeah, absolutely. In the sense of academics, I'm a junior in college currently with 5 consecutive dean's lists going on number 6 this semester. I was able to graduate high school early, online during the pandemic with perfect grades while working 2 jobs, no less. And in the sense of athletics, I was part of the Siegel High School cross-country team. I had to quit, unfortunately, due to COVID and it overall not being fun. But I got an article written for me in the local paper around that time about me inspiring the cross-country team. And I was able to have the team help with a class project I had, Operation Christmas Child, right? Where you pack shoe boxes full of toys for kids in
Absolutely.
Africa. I was able to get them to help with that. And we actually exceeded the initial goal of 100 boxes by another 100, thanks to that.
Well, I mean, all of those accomplishments, I think, are amazing regardless of whether you're neurodiverse, neurotypical. It's a lot of people aren't achieving a lot of those goals throughout their life. I can say is I was not on 5 consecutive dean's lists, so that would be something that I would have loved to be able to put on my resume. But one of the things that I think that often occurs is that the empowerment, the encouragement, the adding to somebody's esteem as they're going through the process is not something that we've done well as a society for autistic individuals to inspire the ability to say, yes, I can accomplish all of this. What was it like when you were growing up? Did you have that supportive environment that was telling you that, autism shouldn't be a barrier that is going to prevent you from anything? It should be something that could contribute to your life.
I definitely had. My parents have been my biggest supporters, and they are still. They got me occupational therapy, physical therapy, ABA therapy. They even fought with the school, my middle school, when they cut my IEP off completely because I was doing well academically. This was back in Tennessee, so there were some stigmas I had to overcome around that time. But the school's still known that autism isn't necessarily academic struggles, it's social and communications struggles, which an IEP is needed for. I later learned that cutting an IEP without parental consent is actually illegal in the United States. Yet schools somehow find loopholes in that. So I'm extremely grateful for my parents for sticking with me still.
And were you a part of a lot of that decision making as you were growing up? Because I mean, you mentioned that you need parental consent to cut an IEP. I think the voice of the individual that's receiving care is so important in this process. Did you feel like you were a part of a lot of those discussions as well, as far as saying, what it is that's going to help support you, that's going to make it so that your experience through academics, through that your experience in the overall school environment was something that you
I
could tailor?
uh, it was 50-50, I'll be honest. Some things I was, some things I wasn't, but I think that was mainly due to the teachers in that particular school, not necessarily my parents. They support me still, like I said.
So having that community support and that environment where you have folks who you could rely on, which I think that we all kind of need in our lives, is something that drove you to say, you know what, I'm ready for that next challenge. I'm ready for that next hurdle. A lot of autistic individuals don't have that opportunity to pursue that next step in their education process. And I'd love to hear a little bit about that from your perspective, as far as how it is that you were able to say and that you were able to navigate and find the right resources to A, find the right university, B, to be able to kind of make sure that those supports that you might still desire to be able to feel that you're at your best at the university are there, and that you created that environment around you. So how did you go through the process of finding the right university that's going to be your fit?
Well, I'll be honest and say I picked the first university that came to mind when we first moved to Ohio. We lived in Tennessee for a while, and around the time we moved from Tennessee to Ohio, it was getting to be the time to choose a college and transition into adulthood. So I picked Lake Erie College, and at first I was nervous, but my parents were extremely supportive in getting me over that fear and that hurdle.
And then as far as that social environment, that because college, I think, is a challenge socially for a lot of us. Is that when I think about my college days, I was still learning who I was. I think about my daughter who's about to go to college, and she's still trying to figure out who she is, how she's going to navigate the independence. Was that different for you, or do you feel like, your experience was similar to a lot of other college students?
I'd say it wasn't any difference besides me keeping to myself and hanging out with a couple of people every now and again, just because a lot of those people in college lived in both campuses I was on before deciding to do online my junior and senior year. They were clearly there to party. A lot of my generation, the TikTok generation, and is there to party, in my opinion. But I was mainly focused on what really mattered, which was getting the degree so I can function in society as a human being and get a good job to pay off that massive bill of student loan debt that's going to come in a year and a half.
Yeah, and I mean, in that next transition, I think for all college students is extremely, it's another tough transition because you like you said, you're trying to find your next fit. You're trying to find your next job. You're trying to figure out where it is that you want your career path to go. And I think that everybody goes through some form of exploration during that time period. One of the unique things that I think that you have that when we were talking earlier has brought about a lot of I guess it's brought about a lot of opportunity is your ability to go out in the community and advocate and start building a platform and practicing some of the skills that you want to be able to do as a communications major. What has that experience as an advocate, as a community partner? You mentioned the Christmas project, things like that. It's how has that helped to shape your next step going forward?
I'm mainly just a guy who believes in his cause and thinks it should be given as much attention as possible in our society. So I think it's definitely made an impact in the community and world of autism, me using my platform for good. And I also apply the lessons I learned from my parents to the advocacy. One example recently that I would have had done at the time of this recording is running a piece on the Kanye West thing. He revealed himself to have autism, but Ben used his platform to spew out really horrible crap, which I'm not even sure I can say on here, of course. So I wrote that piece to say No, Kanye, you don't get to use autism as a justification for that. So I'm basically just a guy who's not afraid to speak his mind and who truly believes in the cause being treated with respect.
And that brings up a pretty big question right now, is that when you're talking about the autism spectrum, it's extremely broad. And it's everything is individual to what that experience is, how you're going through, and what your perspective on a variety of issues are. But that life experience defines who we are. Is that your experience with autism, I would imagine, is different than a lot of other people's experience with autism, as is all of our experiences in life in general. How do you go about advocating for autistic individuals? Are you looking at it as far as just making everybody aware, being able to look at it through all perspectives, all needs, or are you looking more at those that kind of are more similar to your experience?
Honestly, a little bit of both awareness and fostering inclusion in our society.
And with that inclusion, is it where's that line? Because there are going to be some advocates out there that would say is that, some of the treatment modalities aren't appropriate. They're going to have some of the advocates that are saying, what we need to do as a community is try and understand how to be able to empower everybody so that they feel like they're not being stigmatized in the environment around them. Can treatment and acceptance work together?
Hmm, I absolutely think it can, especially with therapies. I just think people should have an open mind to all perspectives.
And that, I would imagine, is that different people at different parts of their lives benefit from different therapies. Is that depending on what's happening in your life, you might need a psychotherapist to help you with anxiety. You might need somebody who is looking at medication management if you have any sort of medical issue going on. You might need behavioral or social supports, depending on if that's a limiting factor to you being able to live the life that you're hoping to be able to do and build some of those skills. Um, that kind of makes me think about some of the advocacy projects that are out there and what you hope to be able to accomplish with that advocacy. Is what does breaking down barriers mean for you as far as being able to help autistic individuals really be included in anything that they're hoping to be involved in life?
I would say breaking down barriers means eliminating stigmatizations that have become so accepted in our society. One example I'm doing recently is the vaccine thing with RFK. That conspiracy theory has been around for generations. And when I saw it being put on a big platform like Congress, I figured they need to hear it from an actual autistic person. With a lot of these things, I think if people heard an actual autistic person's perspective, someone who's doing great things in the world, those stigmatizations would never exist again, probably.
Do you think that there's been a problem historically with the autistic voice not being heard? Do you think that maybe it's a concern that others are speaking for them versus them having a platform to be able to really share their personal experience?
I absolutely do.
And when you're talking about some of these personal experiences, what's that feel like? Have you had the chance to go out there and put yourself out there to explain to whether it's a legislator or an advocacy position? What's the response that you get back?
Praise and people telling me how much I inspire them.
And I would imagine that's gotta feel good and feel empowering, that you feel like you're listened to and that your experience can help to drive policy or decision making or even just an open-mindedness around you. Have you been able to kind of maintain some of those connections from the folks that you have gone out and spoken to, where you've seen their lives or their perspectives change because of what work you're doing?
I definitely have, with multiple people actually.
And when that change is occurring, is that what do you see as far as that being, the path forward? Is that if you reach one person, what would you hope would occur after that?
That I reach even more people. And hopefully, eventually, autism awareness becomes more of a mainstream cause and it becomes common knowledge that autistic people and neurodivergent people deserve the same amount of help as everyone else.
And I think you're spot on with that. I think that everybody deserves the resources that they need to be able to succeed. And I think that everybody's so unique in their experience that we need to individualize a lot of that. Where does the autistic specific advocacy and fundraising and support, where do you think that that's needed most? Is it needed most in childhood education? Is it needed more in the employment or secondary education spaces? Where do you think that we should be focusing a lot of our energy right now to help inform those around us? What is the need? What is the perspective or the feeling that's being put out there through the autistic community?
I would say everywhere. Early childhood schools, secondary school, the workplace, it needs to be common knowledge. Like I said, about such and such person is autistic. They may need a little bit of help with this, that, or the other.
And you've done that, I think, on your journey, because you've demonstrated that there shouldn't be any barriers, because you've been able to live up to and excel and surpass many people in your academic journey and in your athletic journey prior to. You're about to start your career, and in a year and a half, you'll be applying or starting your employment. As far as you're leaving school, you're going to be graduating. Are there concerns that you have or things that you want to make sure that employers are aware of that are going to be better supportive of a neurodiverse culture?
I mainly want employers to give me a chance, especially nowadays in such a divided society where some of these inclusion policies are being called into question.
And what might be some of the policies that you feel like are current barriers in the workforce that we should be talking about so that we can make them better?
Mm, Honestly, all of them, but mainly giving people a chance, and no matter what they're going through.
Yeah, so I've talked to a variety of people just over the past several years on the employment issue, and I'd love your perspective, because I've been told that all the way from the interview process straight into the work environment is that there are components that, some of the hallmark kind of characteristics of somebody who's neurodiverse might have some challenges with. And during the interview process, there might be components of that social piece that are very hard during the interview. Is that you could be the most qualified candidate, but sometimes it's hard in the interview process for them to see that in you, because they're trying to look for themselves. They're trying to look for that neurotypical person versus realizing that the way that you're presenting yourself is authentic, it's unique, and it's also something that can contribute to their workforce. Do you think that there's parts to the interview where people are coming in with bias?
I absolutely agree. I think it depends on the person.
And with that, is that something that should be coached? Is it something that we should be looking at even in somebody's human resource certification programs? Like, should they be looking at some of these components of understanding that, hey, if I'm interviewing somebody, is that I can't hold this against them because they have a different way of expressing themselves, or some of the social components that I expect out of people shouldn't be expectations. I should be able to kind of see that everybody is going to respond differently in an interview and look past that and look at the intangible qualities of, can they do work well? Are they motivated? Are they going to work hard? Those components of what a real good employee might be. Do you think that that's something that needs to be trained on?
Absolutely. They should definitely focus exclusively on what makes a good employee instead of their own bias against certain groups of people.
And then if you flip that script, are there certain things that you had mentioned that, when you were in primary education or secondary education, is that there were times where they were trying to potentially take away an IEP, but you had advocates that were working to say, no, you can't take that IEP away from me. Are there additional pieces that are skills that can be worked on for individuals that maybe have some of that social, either a the lack of specific social skills or social anxiety, or who maybe aren't as comfortable in those group environments or within the interview process? Should we be helping to maintain those skills, coaching those skills, teaching those skills through the IEP process as well, so that people have a chance to succeed in the workforce?
Very much so. Right from first grade all the way to when the individual graduates high school, that should be coached to every day, not just for neurodivergent individuals, but for all students.
I think that's right. When I look at just the general population right now, is that I think that social skills are hard. I think that oftentimes is that we are caught behind screens nowadays, where it's a little bit easier to be able to navigate things without the connection of understanding some of the other components of language, which might be body language, might be looking at the entire concept of what's occurring around us. And the communication becomes a little bit harder for a lot of people, and it should be taught. When we're talking about the success that you've had and the abilities that you've had to be able to kind of work through that, I would imagine there's a lot of neurodiverse people that can do the same things, that are excelling in academics, excelling in the job world, that have all the skills to be able to really be a leader in their fields. When we're talking about future advocacy, when we're talking about being able to really help everyone reach their potential, where is it that you're hoping to take your career? Like, what is it that you're hoping to advocate for most that's going to drive this initiative?
I would say definitely more awareness. And another big focus in my work is special education reform and improving that system. And since my career, I want to work for an autism nonprofit in some way eventually. And then once I establish myself in that career, I want to run for some form of political office, whether that be locally or nationally, so I can get more neurodivergent minds into political office.
So moving from grassroots right into real policy work, and that's the path that you're hoping for yourself.
Yes, sir.
And what sort of advice would you give to others? Because I mean, you have the confidence to be able to take those next steps. You developed a plan for yourself, and you're executing on it, which I could say is that a lot of young professionals don't have that foresight or that planning already built in yet. What advice do you give to other autistic individuals that may be doubting themselves right now or doubting their potential? What would you be telling them?
I would say simply embrace who you are. If people don't like you for you, don't give them the time of day. They're the ones missing out on an amazing person.
And would you imagine that there's always going to be an opportunity out there? Is that say somebody is missing out on you? Is there somebody else who's going to be more accommodating and be able to benefit from that relationship with you, and that you'll be able to benefit more from that support?
Very much so. There's a lot of really good people in the world. It took me a long time to realize that.
And when you're talking about universities, when you're talking about the job world, and kind of being able to find that right fit, are there questions or are there things that you would recommend looking at to make sure that you're walking into an environment that is going to accept you, empower you, and give you the chance to be able to fulfill your potential in the way you want?
Yeah, I would say be as open as you can to the employer as possible early. I personally put the autism diagnosis on my resume so that employers know that they should be inclusive. And if they reject that application because of that bias, that's on them, not you.
Yeah, and I would hope that more people become accepting and that is no longer a barrier going forward. And I do believe that those strong organizations are the ones that don't have that bias, because that's going to make their organization stronger. It's going to make the performance of everybody within that workforce stronger, as being able to kind of see that, every person brings a unique skill set to the job force. And the more that we're able to take all those strengths and combine them together, the better our organization will end up being. So you have some events coming up on the horizon. Where are you going to be speaking next? Where are folks going to be able to kind of hear your message?
Well, at the end of Autism Awareness Month on April 25th, I'm going to have a special education forum I'll be hosting from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. at Lake Erie College.
And what is if you were to pick one or two things within the special education structure right now that you feel like need to change, what would be those one or two major things that we need to be addressing?
I'll do one big one, making sure IEPs are followed as accurately as possible.
Yeah, and do you think that there's resources right now that provide for that, or do you think that there has to be more resource, more support given to those schools to say, hey, here are the staff. This is the additional funding. This is the way to be able to do it correctly, versus not having the resources and then cutting off some of the needed parts of that service?
There could definitely be more resources out there, yes.
And that hopefully will be the tail end of your career, as when you get into the politics, is hopefully you can drive some of that and get those resources in place. But Kadin, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience. I think it's another testament to the fact that there shouldn't be limitations, is that we're all different, we're all unique, and we all have strengths and areas that we're trying to improve upon, but we can all contribute in the way that we want to within our world, as long as we have the supports to be able to do so. And in some ways, like yours, where you're actually leading, you're developing some of these components of success that others aren't going to be able to access. And I mean, I applaud the fact that you worked through some of the barriers and you're thriving, and that you're breaking down some of the walls for others that are following in your footsteps.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Autism Weekly. We hope you tune back in next week to learn more about autism in the real world. Autism Weekly is now found on all the major listening apps, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. Subscribe to be notified when we post a new podcast. Autism Weekly is produced by ABS Kids. ABS Kids is proud to provide diagnostic assessments and ABA therapy to children with developmental delays like autism spectrum disorder. You can learn more about ABS Kids and the Autism Weekly podcast by visiting abskids.com. Thanks for tuning in. See you again next week.